The great hall of the stone keep didn't smell of power. It smelled of fear. You could taste it in the air, a bitter, metallic tang beneath the heavy perfume and the smoke of 100 candles. They stood us in a line, we Omegas from the village of Elmwood, dressed in silks we'd never earned, jewels that felt like shackles against our skin. We were a peace offering, a line of beautiful, trembling gifts for a king who had never asked for us. I kept my eyes on the floor, on the worn gray hem of my cloak. It was the only familiar thing left. The rest, the gown, the slippers, the terrible, waiting silence, belonged to a nightmare. My fingers found the simple cord at my throat, the smooth, cool shape of the river stone hanging from it. My mother's stone, the last piece of home. When the doors groaned open, the silence didn't break. It deepened, turned to ice. Boots on stone, a rhythm of absolute authority. I didn't need to look up to feel him. King Kale, the alpha of the Stone Keep, the man who held my village's life in his hand like a bird he could crush or set free. They said he was carved from winter and shadow. They were wrong. He was the storm before the winter, the pressure in the air that makes your bones ache. I felt his gaze sweep over the line of glittering girls, a dismissive, cold assessment, and then it stopped. On me, the one in the plain gray cloak, trying to disappear. My heart became a trapped thing, beating against my ribs. That one. His voice was like gravel dragged over stone, low, unforgiving. The Omega in gray. Bring her to the North Tower. No! The word screamed inside my skull, but my lips were frozen. The king's guards, men of iron and grim faces, closed in. They didn't touch me, but their presence was a cage. One gestured with his chin, and I was walking, my feet moving on a path I never chose. The roar of the hall faded behind us, swallowed by the echoing drum of our footsteps on a spiral staircase that only went up, up into the heart of the mountain, into the silence. Torches flickered, throwing dancing, monstrous shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The air grew colder, smelling of ancient rock and isolation. The North Tower, a place for prisoners or for secrets, not for a village healer who just wanted to go home. We reached a door of dark, age-blackened oak, banded with iron. The lead guard knocked once, a sound that echoed like a judge's gavel. A moment of utter silence. Then, from within, a single word. Enter. The guard looked at me, his eyes unreadable. The king will see you alone. He opened the door and a wave of warmth rushed out, carrying a scent that stopped my breath for a second. Pine smoke, leather, and something else, something wild and clean, like the heart of a forest after a lightning strike. Him. I stepped inside. The door shut behind me with a soft, final click, the sound of a lock turning in a world I no longer understood. The chamber was circular, dominated by a massive fireplace where a fire roared, fighting the tower's chill. Books lined one wall. A large, scarred wooden desk stood near the window, and by the fire, in a chair that was more throne, sat King Kale. Without his ceremonial armor, he was somehow more terrifying. He wore a simple dark tunic, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing pale, silvery scars, the story of a life lived by the sword. His hair, the color of wet slate, was tied back, emphasizing the harsh, handsome lines of his face. And his eyes, they were not the cold blue of ice I'd expected. They were the gray of a storm-washed sky, sharp, intelligent, and utterly focused on me. He didn't speak. He just watched, letting the weight of his gaze, the power in the room, press down on me. I forced my chin up, clutching my cloak tighter. Alara of Elmwood. His voice felt foreign, a statement, not a question. Your Majesty. My voice was a thread, but it did not break. He stood, unfolding his height slowly. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, moving with a predator's grace. He didn't approach. He walked to a side table, pouring a single glass of a dark, ruby liquid. "Are you afraid?" he asked, his back to me. The question was a trap. Admit fear, show weakness. Deny it, be a liar he could smell. "I am concerned," I said, choosing my words like stepping on stones across a swift river. "For my village, the treaty was unclear on many points." He turned, glass in hand, a faint, humorless curve on his lips. "The treaty was perfectly clear. Your council owes a debt. You are the currency." He took a sip, his storm gray eyes never leaving me. "But I prefer a different kind of transaction." A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold traced my spine. "What transaction?" He set the glass down. "A bargain between you and me. Leave the council out of it." He moved then, not towards me, but to stand before the fire, his profile etched in gold and shadow. "One night. You remain here in this tower until dawn. You will not be harmed. You will not be touched against your will. You will simply endure. The night, the isolation, the company of a king your people call a monster." His words hung in the air, too strange to make sense. "Endure? That is all?" "That is everything," he said, his voice low. "If you are here when the first light touches that window," he gestured to a narrow, high slit in the stone, "I will sign a decree. Elmwood will be under my personal protection. No more tithes, no more fear of raids from the eastern clans. My soldiers will guard your borders. Your people will be safe, truly safe." The promise was a beacon, so bright it was painful. Safety for old man Arlen, who could barely walk, for the children who played in the muddy square, for my little herb garden behind the cottage. A life without the constant gnawing fear. And if I refuse, the words were ash in my mouth. He finally turned his full gaze on me, and the intensity of it was a physical force. "Then the treaty stands as your council wrote it, a yearly tribute of goods and persons, and my protection extends only as far as my interest, which in a poor border village is very, very thin. The Eastern Alpha, Vorlag, has been eyeing your valley for years. Without my explicit shield, he will take it, and his methods are not gentle." The choice was a blade, and it was poised over everyone I loved. Stay one night and buy their future. Refuse and condemn them. "And if I try to leave," I whispered, "before dawn." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, something more complex. "The door is not locked, Alara. You may walk out that door right now, but if you do, the bargain is void. You will have chosen your own freedom over their security. A fair choice, a hard one, but a choice only you can make." He was offering me a path that felt like both a salvation and a prison. One night of my fear for a lifetime of their peace. But what kind of night? What did endure truly mean in this stone tower with this unpredictable king? Why? The question burst from me. Why offer this? You could just take what the treaty promises. You could just take me. A long, heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. He looked into the flames, and for a fleeting second, the harsh lines of his face seemed to soften with a memory or a regret. Because chains make poor foundations, healer, and I am tired of things that break. He looked back at me, his expression once again unreadable. "So, do we have a bargain, Alara of Elmwood? Your knight for their future?" My hands were trembling. I clenched them into fists, feeling the bite of my nails against my palms. I saw my mother's face, weary from a lifetime of worry. I saw the village, so fragile. I thought of the river stone against my throat, a touchstone of a simpler life. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. I met the storm in his eyes, and I did not look away. "We have a bargain, Your Majesty. Until dawn." A slow nod. "Until dawn."
He picked up his glass again, turning back to the fire, dismissing me, yet holding me there in the weight of his presence. The chamber through that archway is yours. There is a bath, clothes, whatever you need. I will be here when you are ready. It wasn't an end, it was a beginning, the first moments of the longest night of my life. And as I walked toward the archway, feeling his gaze on my back like a brand, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. The greatest thing I had to endure tonight might not be the fear or the isolation. It might be the man himself and the unsettling, dangerous mystery of why he had chosen me for this strange and terrible bargain.
The bathing chamber was a small, steam-filled alcove carved right into the mountain. A copper tub steamed with hot water, and someone had scattered lavender and pine needles into it. The scent was achingly close to the salves I made back home, a cruel and kind reminder all at once. The kindness felt like the most dangerous trap of all. I shed the borrowed silk, the fabric slithering to the floor like a discarded skin. In the water, I scrubbed away the dust of the journey, the scent of fear, the feel of 100 judging eyes in the hall. The heat seeped into my bones, but the cold knot of anxiety in my stomach remained. Wrapped in a thick, soft towel, I found a simple linen shift and a warm woolen robe laid out for me. No finery, no pretense. Just comfort. It unnerved me more than Jules would have. Was this part of the endurance? To lull me into lowering my guard? When I emerged, my damp hair loose around my shoulders, the main chamber had changed. King Kale was no longer by the fire. He stood at the tall, narrow window, a stark silhouette against the deep indigo of the twilight sky. He held a book, its pages open, but he wasn't reading. He was watching the last light die over his mountains. He didn't turn as I entered. "Do you believe in ghosts, Alara?" The question, so quiet and unexpected, stole my breath. I stopped, clutching the robe tighter. "Ghosts, Your Majesty?" "The kind that live in stone," he said, his voice a low rumble. "In memories, in choices that can't be unmade." He finally turned. The firelight caught the planes of his face, painting him in warmth and shadow. He looked younger like this, and infinitely wearier. "This tower holds many. It is why I use it for reflection, or for bargains that require clarity." He was telling me something, but the meaning was shrouded. "Is that why I am here? For clarity?" "You are here," he said, closing the book and setting it aside, "because in a hall full of polished gems, you are the only one who looked like a weapon." He took a step toward me, then stopped as if remembering a line between us. "Your council thought they were sending me a fragile Omega to appease me. They sent me a woman who walked in with her head high, hiding her fear behind a cloak of defiance. That is not a gift, that is a challenge." My heart hammered. I intended no challenge, only to survive the presentation. "And yet," he said, a ghost of something that wasn't a smile touching his lips, "here you are, surviving." He gestured to a pair of chairs near the fire. Smaller, simpler than his throne-like seat. "Sit. The night is long, and we have only our words to fill it." Cautiously, I took the chair opposite, perching on the edge. The fire's warmth reached my bare feet. The silence stretched, but it was a different silence now. Not empty, but waiting. "Tell me of Elmwood," he commanded, but his tone was not harsh. It was curious. "Not the tithes or the fields. Tell me of the people my decree will save." And so I spoke, haltingly at first, then with growing passion. I told him of old Mara, who knew every herb in the forest, but whose hands shook too much to gather them. Of the twins, Evander and Alara, named for me, a thought that squeezed my heart, who were always scraping their knees. I spoke of the long winters, the struggle to store enough, the constant watchfulness for smoke on the eastern horizon. I spoke of life and of the fragile web of community that held it together. He listened, not as a king hearing a report, but with a deep, unsettling focus. He asked questions. "And when the river flooded 2 winters ago, where did the village take shelter? Who leads when the head man is ill?" His questions were practical, strategic almost, but they showed a mind that understood systems, people, vulnerabilities.
You see them, he said finally, leaning back, not as a faceless crowd, but as individuals. That is a leader's sight. Or a healer's. I am just a healer, I insisted. There's no just about it, he replied, his gaze intense. Healers understand cost. They know what must be cut away to save the whole. They understand bargains with life itself. He paused, his eyes drifting to the fire. My father did not. He saw only glory, expansion. He made bargains without counting the cost, until the cost came to collect, with poison in his cup and a dagger in the dark. The admission was like a crack in stone. I froze, the horror of his words settling in the room. He had spoken of his father's murder as plainly as one might discuss the weather, but the weight of it was immense. You were there? I whispered. I drank from the same cup, he said, his voice flat. A lesser dose. I lived. He did not. My mother did not. He looked at me, and the storm in his eyes was a tempest of old pain. The assassin was an Omega, one of the gifts from a so-called ally. The world tilted. The eastern clans, Vorlag, they used Omegas as weapons, and King Kale's own father had been killed by one. My blood ran cold. This bargain, my being here, it wasn't just political. It was a wound, a test, a ghost he was staring down. And yet, I said, my voice trembling, you offered me this bargain. You brought an Omega, a stranger, into your tower. After that, because of that, he corrected, his voice rough. I learned that day that trust given blindly is a suicide pact, but trust earned, that is different. I do not know you, Elara of Elmwood, but I know your council sold you without a second thought. I know you walked in here to save them anyway. That is a language I understand. It is not the language of a poisoner. The room felt too small, the air too thick. His honesty was a weapon more disarming than any threat. He was showing me his scars, and in doing so, he was asking me to see the man behind the crown, the survivor behind the king. What happens at dawn? I asked, the core question we had been circling. If I endure, truly. He held my gaze, the fire reflecting in his stormy eyes. At dawn, you choose. The decree will be yours to take to Elmwood. You may go and live your life knowing you bought their peace, or... He hesitated, a fracture in his royal composure. Or you may choose to stay, not as a tribute, not as a prisoner of a bargain, but as an ally, a voice for villages like yours at a table where they currently have none. The offer was so vast, so impossible, it stole the air from my lungs. A voice? From my people? At the king's table? You would trust an Omega from a border village to advise you? I would trust the woman who bargained for her people with her own courage, he said. The world is changing, Elara. Old hatreds are festering. Vorlag in the east is not the only threat. There are whispers of an ancient power stirring, something that cares not for Alpha or Omega, but only for subjugation. I need minds that see clearly, not just swords that strike blindly. Ancient power? Whispers? This was more than border squabbles. This was a shadow looming over his kingdom, over my home. He was offering me not just safety, but a role in a coming storm. Before I could even begin to process this, a sharp, urgent knock shattered the moment. The same young guard from before entered, his face pale. My king, forgive the intrusion. A rider has come from the east. He bears Vorlag's mark. Kale was on his feet in an instant, every trace of the weary confessional man gone, replaced by the hard-edged ruler. What message? The guard's eyes flicked to me, then back. He demands an audience. He says he has come to collect what is owed. He speaks of the Elmwood Treaty. The air turned to ice in my lungs. Vorlag, here, now, before dawn, coming for what he thought was his, coming for me. Kale's gaze locked with mine. The storm in his eyes was no longer memory. It was present, and it was deadly. The bargain stands, Elara, he said, his voice a low vow. You are under my protection. But the night just became more interesting. He strode toward the door, then paused, looking back at me. Stay in this tower, no matter what you hear. This is where you endure. And then he was gone. the door closing behind him, leaving me alone with the roaring fire, the whispering ghosts in the stone, and a new chilling fear. Vorlag was here, and my bargain for Dawn, for my people's future, had just become a race against time.
Silence rushed in to fill the space King Kale had left behind. It was a different silence now, heavy, pregnant with threat. The fire's crackle was too loud, the sigh of the wind against the tower stones a mournful whisper. Vorlag. The name was a curse in my village, spoken in hushed tones to frighten children into obedience. He was the Eastern Alpha, a man of brute force and cruel appetites, whose raids left behind scorched earth and broken lives. And he was here, in the Stone Keep, demanding what he thought the treaty promised. My fingers found my river stone, its smooth surface a desperate anchor. The bargain felt like a fragile glass sculpture, and Vorlag was a hammer swinging toward it. Would Kale's protection hold, or would the politics of power force him to hand over a single Omega to avoid a war? I couldn't stay still. The urge to pace was a physical itch under my skin. I moved to the narrow window, pressing my forehead against the cold stone. Below, the courtyard was a chessboard of torchlight and moving shadows. I saw the dark mass of the gates, the glitter of armor as guards formed up, and there, a splash of ominous color amidst the stone and steel, a standard, blood red with a black slavering hound, Vorlag's sigil. My breath fogged the glass. Endure, Kale had said. But how do you endure not knowing? The waiting was a torture all its own. Time lost meaning. It stretched and snapped, measured only by the slow dance of the flames in the hearth and the frantic rhythm of my heart. I listened for sounds, shouts, the clash of steel, anything, but the thick stone muffled the world to a distant murmur. Then, a new sound, not from below, but from within the tower itself, a soft, rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape. I froze, my blood turning to ice water. It was coming from the spiral staircase, just beyond the door. Not the firm tread of boots, something slower, deliberate, a dragging step followed by that faint, grating scrape. My eyes darted to the door. He'd said it was not locked. I could open it. I could run. The scraping grew closer. It was on the landing now, just outside. I backed away from the window, my back pressing against the cold wall beside the fireplace, my hand closing around the iron poker. It was heavy, clumsy, but it was something. The scraping stopped, right outside the door. A long, tense silence stretched so thin I thought it would scream. Then, a voice. Not Kale's commanding baritone, not a guard's curt tone. This was a voice like oil over gravel, slick and unpleasant. It hummed a tuneless little melody, just a few notes, over and over. And then it spoke, clear as day through the oak. Little bird in a stone cage, can you sing for me? Every hair on my body stood on end. It was him, Vorlag. He wasn't in the hall with Kale. He was here. The king of stone thinks his walls are high, but hounds have a good nose. We can smell fear. We can smell sweetness. I bit down on my lip until I tasted copper, silencing the whimper that rose in my throat. He cannot enter. Kale said the door is not locked, but he would not. My mind raced. Was this part of the test? A cruel trick? The young village elder, old Mara with the shaking hands. She sends her regards, says to tell you her rosemary bush finally bloomed. A lie, of course. I've never seen your pitiful village. But it's the thought that counts, yes? The thought that I could know, that I could be there right now while you hide in this tower. Terror, sharp and acrid, flooded my mouth. He was playing with me, trying to break me before dawn.
"The king offers you a bargain," he hissed, the playfulness gone, replaced with a venomous edge. "But some bargains have hidden teeth. What does he want with a little healer, You are a symbol, a pretty piece to move on his board, and when the game is over, the pieces are discarded." The poker trembled in my hand. "Don't answer. Don't make a sound." "My bargain is simpler," he whispered, the playfulness gone, replaced with a venomous edge. "Open the door. Come with me now. I will spare Elmwood. Not protect it. Spare it. A quick mercy instead of a slow, grinding conquest. 1 life for 100. A better bargain, little bird. A cleaner one." It was a monstrous lie. I knew it in my soul. Vorlag did not spare, he consumed. But the logic of it, the horrific, twisted logic, wormed its way into my fear. What if Kael's protection failed? What if, in the face of Vorlag's army, he was forced to renegotiate? "Dawn is so far away," Vorlag sighed, the dragging, scraping sound starting again, as if he were pacing. "So many things can happen before dawn. A fire and a thatched roof, a misplaced arrow, tragic accidents, or a door opening, a choice made." The pressure was immense, a physical weight crushing my chest. He was offering a way out, a terrible, bloody way out that would make me the architect of my people's doom instead of their savior. My knuckles were white on the poker. Endure, just endure. Suddenly, the scraping stopped. A new sound. Boots, many of them marching fast up the stairs. Kael's voice, cold and sharp as a drawn blade, cut through the silence. "You are far from the audience hall, Vorlag." A low, rumbling laugh. "Merely exploring your impressive keep, Stone King. I thought I heard a nightingale, trapped and singing so sadly." "The only thing trapped here is you." Kael's voice was lethally calm. "On a landing surrounded by my guards. Your audience is concluded. You will leave my keep now. And my tribute, the treaty, is between myself and Elmwood," Kael finished. "You have no claim here. The next time you climb my tower uninvited, you will not walk back down. You will fall." The tension sizzled through the door. I could picture them, 2 alphas squared off in the dim stairwell, violence hanging in the air like lightning about to strike. Finally, Vorlag's oily chuckle returned. "As you wish, for now. Dawn comes for all of us, King of Stone. We shall see what it brings." The dragging, scraping footsteps receded, descending the stairs, followed by the firm, disciplined tread of Kael's guards. Silence returned, but it was a battered, wounded thing. I didn't move. I stood with my back against the wall, the poker still raised, shaking uncontrollably. The door didn't open. Minutes passed. Then, Kael's voice, softer now, right outside. "Ilara, he is gone. The landing and the stairs below are guarded. You are safe." I couldn't speak. My throat was sealed shut. "I give you my word," he said, and the words were not a king's decree, but a man's promise. "No one will enter this room tonight without your consent, not even me." And then his footsteps faded away, leaving me truly alone. I slid down the wall, the poker clattering to the floor, my strength gone. The tears came then, hot and silent, a release of the terror he had injected into me. He knew exactly where to press, what fears to exploit. Old Mara, the village, the relentless ticking clock until dawn. But he'd failed. I was still here. I had endured. As I sat on the floor, the fire warming my side, a new realization dawned, colder and clearer than the fear. Vorlag hadn't just come to collect a tribute. He'd come to stop something. He was afraid of this bargain, afraid of what might happen if I stayed until dawn. What did Kael know? What was this ancient power he hinted at, and why was a simple healer from Elmwood suddenly a piece in a game so vast and dangerous that an Eastern alpha would scale a tower to threaten her? The night was no longer about enduring fear. It was about unraveling a mystery, and the first thread was this: I was not who I thought I was, and this bargain was about much, much more than my village's safety.
The fire had burned down to a bed of pulsating coals by the time my trembling ceased. The encounter with Vorlag had shifted something fundamental inside me. The passive fear of the unknown was gone, burned away by the active, targeted malice I had felt through the door. In its place was a cold, clear anger and a sharper, more desperate curiosity. Kyle had offered me a voice at his table. Vorlag had tried to silence me before I could even speak. The two things were connected. I rose, my legs stiff, and rebuilt the fire, feeding it logs until the flames leapt high again, pushing the shadows back to the corners. The light revealed the room anew. The books on the shelves weren't just for show. Their spines were worn, their titles speaking of history, strategy, and, my breath hitched, lore. The old songs of the mountains, before the clans, myths of the first people. I crossed to the shelves, my fingers trailing over the leather bindings. Why would a warrior king keep books of myths? I pulled out the latter volume. It was heavy, the pages thick and velvety under my fingertips. I opened it carefully, near the middle. The script was archaic, but the illustrations were clear. They depicted not wolves or hounds, but strange, elegant creatures with luminous hides and spiraling horns, standing amidst forests that looked both familiar and impossibly ancient. The caption beneath one read, "The Stag Lords of the Verdant Wastes, Guardians of the Ley." Ley? The word meant nothing to me. I turned another page. A map, beautifully illuminated, showed the mountain range that now housed the stone keep, but it was labeled differently. The spine of the world, convergence point. A convergence of what? You have an interest in history? I jumped, the book nearly slipping from my hands. Kyle stood in the archway leading from the stairs. I hadn't heard him return. He looked weary, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his gaze was alert, fixed on the book in my hands. I was just looking for something to pass the time. I carefully closed the book and slid it back onto the shelf, feeling like a child caught with a forbidden sweet. He entered fully, closing a heavy tapestry over the archway, sealing us in. He had changed, shedding his formal tunic for a simpler, dark shirt. He carried a tray, which he set on the table between the chairs. On it was a steaming pot of tea, 2 cups, and a small plate of honey cakes. "A peace offering," he said, his voice rough, "for the disturbance." He should not have been able to get up here, my anger making my voice stronger than I intended. Kyle's jaw tightened. No, he should not. It implies he had help within my walls. That is a problem I will deal with tomorrow. He poured the tea, the fragrant steam, chamomile and lemon balm, I noted, calming herbs, curling between us. But for tonight, it changes nothing. The bargain stands. I took the cup he offered, the warmth seeping into my cold fingers. He said things about my village to frighten me. I know. Kyle's tone was grim. It is his way. He sows doubt like a farmer sows rye. But you must understand, Ilara, his fear is the most telling thing of all. He is not afraid of me taking a village healer as a tribute. He is afraid of me finding an ally. He is afraid of you. The concept was so absurd I almost laughed. Me? I am no one, a healer from a forgotten valley. Are you? Kyle sat in his chair, cradling his own cup. Tell me of your mother, the one who gave you that stone. The shift in topic was so sudden it left me disoriented. I touched the river stone automatically. My mother? She died when I was young. A fever took her one winter. This stone was all she left me. She said it came from the heart of the White River, that it held clarity. And your father? I never knew him.
My mother came to Elmwood alone, already carrying me. She was a stranger. She had knowledge of herbs, so they let her stay. Kyle was silent for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "The White River begins in the Glimmerwood," he said slowly. "A place no one goes. A place that appears on old maps, like that one," he nodded toward the bookshelf, "and then vanishes from newer ones. It is said to be guarded." A strange chill, unrelated to the tower's cold, traced my spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm not sure," he admitted, a frustratingly honest answer. "But for years, Vorlag and others like him have been searching for something, an artifact, a source of power from the time of the Stag Lords. They believe it is the key to ruling not just clans, but the land itself. Their raids, they're not just for plunder, they're searching, and their search has been getting closer to Elmwood." The pieces began to click together with a dreadfully logical finality. My unknown past, my mother's mysterious origin near a forbidden wood, the strange interest of a brutal alpha, and a king who researched ancient lore. You think I am connected to this?" My voice was barely a whisper. "I think Vorlag believes you might be," Kyle corrected. "A woman of unknown lineage, from the border of a forgotten place, wearing a stone from a sacred river? To a superstitious and greedy mind, that is a sign, a clue. He would want to possess you, to pry the secret from you, or, failing that, to ensure no one else could." The room seemed to spin. My whole life, my identity, was being rewritten in the span of a few heartbeats. I wasn't just Ilara the healer. I was a key, a prize. "And you?" I asked, the question laced with a new kind of fear. "Is that why you chose me? To possess this clue before he could?" Kyle leaned forward, his storm-gray eyes holding mine with a force that felt absolute. "I chose you because when I looked at you, I did not see a clue. I saw a fortress. I saw the same stubborn will to protect that lives in these stones. Vorlag wants to use you. I want to—" He hesitated, searching for the word. "To ally you, to understand what we are facing. Together." Together hung in the air, far more intimate and dangerous than any touch could have been. "The bargain was for protection for my village," I said, clinging to the last solid thing I knew. "And it remains so," he vowed. "But the threat to Elmwood is bigger than Vorlag's raids. It is a shadow stretching across history. If this ancient power stirs, nowhere will be safe. Not the Stone Keep, not Elmwood." He set his cup down. "I cannot force you to stay. At dawn, the decree is yours. You can take it and go, and pray the storm passes you by." "But you think it won't?" "I know it won't," he said, his voice grave, "because you carry a piece of the puzzle, whether you know it or not, and storms have a way of finding their lightning rods." The truth of his words settled into my bones, heavier than any fatigue. Running to Elmwood with a decree might save them from Vorlag's immediate wrath, but it would not save them from whatever was coming. It would not save me. I would be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. "What would staying entail?" I asked, my voice small in the vast, silent room. He said learning, working with my archivist to understand these texts, helping me root out Vorlag's spies in my court, being my eyes and ears among the people, for I have been too long looking at maps and not at faces, and when the time comes, standing beside me to face what comes. It was an offer of partnership, of purpose. It was also an offer to step into the heart of the storm. I looked at the book on the shelf, then at the king before me, who had just laid his own vulnerabilities and fears beside me. He had protected me tonight. He had given me a choice, not once, but again and again. The first light of dawn was still hours away, but a different kind of dawn was breaking inside me, the dawn of understanding. "Vorlat called me a little bird in a cage," I said quietly. Kyle waited, his expression unreadable. I met his gaze. "I am no bird, and this," I gestured to the tower, the books, the man before me, "is not a cage. It is a watchtower. A slow, real smile touched his lips for the first time, a transformative thing that chased the weariness from his face. It was not a smile of victory, but of recognition. "Then, Ilaura of Elmwood," he said softly, "let us begin our watch." But as he spoke, a distant, unearthly sound echoed through the stone, so faint I thought I imagined it. A deep, resonant hum, like a massive plucked string vibrating up from the very foundations of the mountain. The fire flickered. The tea in our cups rippled. Kyle's smile vanished, his head snapping up, every sense alert. The look on his face was not fear, but a profound, grim certainty. "What was that?" I breathed. He looked at me, and the storm in his eyes was now a hurricane. "The first thread has just been pulled," he said, his voice barely audible. The sound faded, leaving behind a silence that felt deafening, charged. The hum hadn't been loud, but it had been felt more than heard, a vibration in the marrow of the mountain, in the teeth at the back of my jaw. Cale was on his feet in an instant, a hand raised for silence. He moved to the wall, pressing his palm flat against the cold stone, his eyes closed in concentration. The firelight painted his profile in stark, tense lines. A full minute passed, the only sound the frantic pounding of my own heart. "It's gone," he said finally, opening his eyes, but the tension didn't leave his shoulders. "What was it?" I asked again, rising from my chair. He turned, his expression grim. "A tremor, but not of the earth." He walked to the bookshelf and pulled out the volume on myths, flipping it open with a practiced hand to a page near the end. He pointed to an illustration of a complex, spiraling network of lines superimposed over a map. The old lore speaks of the ley lines, rivers of power, not water, that flow beneath the earth. They are the lifeblood of the land. Where they converge, places of great power or great vulnerability are born. The Stone Keep is built on one such convergence. I stared at the intricate web on the page. It looked like a mystical root system. And the hum? A disturbance, a plucking of the cord. He closed the book, his face etched with concern. For years they have been silent, dormant. My father believed the tales were just stories, but in the last few months, whispers, rumors from scouts of strange lights in distant valleys, animals behaving erratically, and now this. He looked at me and the weight of kingship was fully upon him. Vorlag's aggression, his sudden, bold move tonight, I do not think it is coincidence. I think he, or someone he serves, is trying to awaken something, to tap into that power. The scope of it was overwhelming. This wasn't about border disputes or clan rivalries. This was about the fundamental balance of the world itself. And somehow, my mother's Riverstone and my own unknown origin were tangled in the center of it. "You said my mother's stone was from the White River near the Glimmerwood. Is that a convergence point too?" Cale's gaze was piercing. The oldest songs call the Glimmerwood the Heartwood. It is said to be the source, the place where the first ley lines sprang forth. It is the most guarded, most forbidden place of all. A source, a heart. Guarded by what? The stag lords from the book? Were they myth or memory? A new, even more terrifying thought occurred to me. If Vorlag wants this power, and he thinks I am a clue, he won't stop, not after tonight. He'll come for Elmwood, decree or no decree, to draw me out. Cale gave a single, slow nod. He will, which is why your bargain, while still valid, is no longer a sufficient shield. A piece of parchment cannot stop a man who believes he is on the verge of grasping godlike power. The safety I had bargained for was crumbling before my eyes, replaced by a far greater, more nebulous threat. The fear returned, but it was a clean, sharp fear now, the fear of a healer recognizing a mortal wound. You could not treat a symptom and ignore the disease. What do we do? The "we" slipped out, natural and inevitable. He heard it. A flicker of something, respect, relief, crossed his face. "First, we ensure Elmwood is not a vulnerable point.
At first light, I will send not a garrison, but an entire company of my best warriors to evacuate the village. Evacuate? The word was a shock. Leave their homes? Bring them here, Kale said, his tone allowing no argument, to the safety of the keep's outer bailey. They will be housed, fed, protected. It is the only way to be certain. Vorlag moves quickly when thwarted. He will strike at what you love to break your will. The thought of old Mara, the twins, everyone I knew, being uprooted, terrified. It was a fresh agony. But the alternative, leaving them as bait in a trap meant for me, was unthinkable. He was right. Second, Kale continued, we learn. We must decipher what clue, if any, you truly carry. Your stone, your lineage. We have until Vorlag regroups, or until the next hum in the ley line, whichever comes first. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. I have an archivist, Orwin, a man who has devoted his life to these texts. He is eccentric, but he is the only one who might understand. And third? I asked, sensing there was more. Kale's stormy eyes met mine, filled with a solemn intensity. Third, we prepare for war, not a clan war, a war for the soul of the land itself, and we must find allies. The other alphas will not listen to tales of ley lines and humming stones. They will see only Vorlag's aggression and my gathering of an omega from a contested village. They will think it a ploy for power. So we have no allies? We have each other, he said simply, and we have the truth. For now, it must be enough. The simplicity of that statement, its staggering weight, settled between us. King and healer, Alpha and Omega, two strangers bound by a bargain, now bound by a destiny that stretched back millennia. The night was waning. Through the high window, the indigo sky was softening at the very edge, hinting at a gray pre-dawn. My night of endurance was almost over, but I realized with a jolt that I no longer want it to end. Walking out at dawn would be running away from the most important duty of my life. I choose to stay, I said, the words clear and firm in the quiet room. Kale didn't smile this time. He bowed his head, a gesture of profound, almost reverent acknowledgement. Then at dawn, Ilara, we begin, not as king and supplicant, but as partners in a siege against the coming dark. He moved to his desk, taking out a fresh piece of parchment, ink and a quill. The decree for Elmwood's protection will be signed as promised, but I will add to it an order for immediate peaceful evacuation and sanctuary within these walls. He began to write, his script bold and decisive. As he wrote, I walked back to the window. The first true sliver of silver-gray light was etching the distant mountain peaks. Dawn. But the view was different now. I didn't see an escape. I saw a kingdom. I saw a land sleeping over a network of hidden, waking power. I saw the faint, glowing embers of watchfires from Vorlag's retreating camp on the eastern plains. A retreat that was not a surrender, but a gathering of strength. The hum in the stone had been a warning, a first thread pulled, and as I stood there, the river stone warm against my skin, I made a silent vow. I would find the other threads. I would learn my mother's secrets, and I would help this stern, wounded king protect not just a village, but the very ground we stood on. A soft sound made me turn. Kale was holding out the parchment. The ink glistened wetly beneath his official seal, a wolf's head howling atop a mountain. For your people, he said. I took it. It was no longer just a shield. It was a first move in a much larger game. Thank you. And then, because it needed to be said, I am afraid. He didn't offer empty comfort. So am I, he admitted, his voice low. But fear is a sharp stone. It can cut the one who holds it, or it can be the first tool to carve a path forward. We will choose the latter. Outside, the world lightened from gray to pale gold. The long night was over. A new day was beginning, and with it, a hunt for truths buried deep in the heart of forgotten woods, and a race against an enemy who wanted to make the earth itself scream. Dawn did not bring peace. It brought a frantic, ordered chaos.
The stone keep, which had felt like a silent, watchful giant, now stirred like a kicked anthill. From the North Tower window, I watched as messengers sprinted across the bailey, officers bellowed orders, and the massive gates groaned open to disgorge a column of riders, the company Cale was sending to Elmwood. My heart twisted as they vanished into the morning mist. I was sending an army to my home, not to defend its walls, but to empty it. The decree felt heavy in the pocket of my robe. A soft knock at the tapestry covering the archway. It was a young maid, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "My lady, the king requests your presence in the scholars' spile when you are ready. I've brought things." She gestured to a small trunk she'd carried up. Things turned out to be simple, sturdy clothes, woolen trousers, a linen tunic, a leather vest, and boots that looked like they could handle mountain paths. No gowns, no silks. Practical gear for a partner, not a prize. The message was clear, and a flicker of gratitude warmed the cold anxiety in my chest. Changed, with my mother's stone securely under my tunic, I followed a silent guard through the labyrinthine keep. We didn't descend into the bustling main halls, but climbed a different, narrower staircase that wound up and up into a part of the fortress that smelled of dust, old paper, and the peculiar dry scent of preserved herbs. The scholar's spire was less a room and more a cave of knowledge. It was circular, every inch of curved wall hidden behind shelves crammed with scrolls, books, and strange artifacts. A broken piece of pottery with spirals, a feather that shone with an iridescent blue, a hunk of crystal that pulsed with a faint inner light. In the center, drowning in a sea of parchment, sat a man so ancient and wizened he seemed made of the same material as his books. Archivist Orwin. He didn't look up as we entered, his nose an inch from a sprawling, crackling map. He was muttering to himself. "Nonsense. The third confluence is clearly east of the Glimmerwood, not west, unless the axial tilt shifted post-cataclysm, which would require a recalculation of all lay vector projections." Cale stood nearby, arms crossed, an island of impatient muscle in the sea of academic chaos. He saw me and gave a brief nod. "Archivist, your subject is here." Orwin's head snapped up. He had eyes of a startling pale blue, magnified hugely by spectacles perched on the very end of his nose. He peered at me, not as a person, but as a fascinating new text. "Ah, the Elmwood anomaly. Come here, girl. Let's have a look at you." I approached cautiously. He circled me, humming, peering at my hair, my hands. No obvious physical markers. The epicanthic fold variation common to the eastern valleys, yes, but the hair, unusual gold. Not from around here, is it? He said it not as a question, but a statement. "My mother came from elsewhere." "Elsewhere?" he scoffed, waving a bony hand. "Elsewhere is not a locus on a map. Precision, girl. Show me the stone." I glanced at Cale. He gave a slight nod. Carefully, I drew the cord over my head and held out the smooth gray riverstone. Orwin didn't take it. He bent so close his spectacles almost touched it. He breathed on it, watched the fog dissipate. He pulled a small polished lens from his robe and examined its surface. "White River quartzite," he declared. "Unmistakable. Carried a long way. Not tumbled in a stream, too symmetrical. This was shaped by hand. See the faint striations here?" He pointed to a trembling finger to lines so fine I'd never noticed them. "Tool marks. Very, very old tools." "Shaped? My mother never said it was shaped. She said she found it." "What does it mean?" Cale's voice cut through the archivist's musings. "It means it is not a mere keepsake," Orwin said, straightening up, his eyes alight with intellectual fire. "It is a token, a key, perhaps. The White River quartz is unique. It is said to resonate with the ley energy, to hold a memory of the land. He shuffled to a cluttered table and began rifling through piles. Where is it? Ah! He hauled out a massive leather-bound tome, its pages edged in flaking gold leaf. The Compendium of Silent Things. Listen. He cleared his throat and read in a dreary, dramatic voice. And the guardians of the heartwood did fashion from the river's bones tokens of clarity. To those of the blood they granted sight. To those of the chosen line they whispered the paths between the worlds. Chills erupted across my skin. Those of the blood, the chosen line. What paths? What worlds? Kale demanded. Metaphorical, most likely, Orwin said, snapping the book shut. Or dimensional theory, or simply poetic nonsense. But the correlation is too strong to ignore. The stone is from the Glimmerwood. The girl carries it. Vorlag wants her. The lines are humming. He fixed his giant eyes on me. What do you feel when you hold it? Feel? It's smooth, cold, sometimes warm. Emotions, impressions. Do you dream of forests you've never seen? His question struck a hidden chord. I had. Vague, troubled dreams of towering, luminous trees and a feeling of profound loss. I'd always blame them on herbal fumes. Sometimes, I admitted quietly. Clapped his hands together, a dry, papery sound. A connection, a latent somatic resonance with the place of its origin. We must test it. Test how? I asked, a thread of alarm in my voice. Before Orwin could answer, a guardsman appeared at the door, breathless. My king, the riders have returned from Elmwood. They have the villagers, but Captain Revick begs your immediate audience in the guard room. He says it's urgent. Kale's expression darkened. Stay with the archivist, he ordered me. Learn what you can. I will deal with this. He strode out, leaving me alone with the strange old man and his cave of whispers. Orwin barely noticed the king's departure. He was bustling about, gathering things, a bowl of water, a pinch of silvery dust, and a tuning fork made of dark metal. The principle is one of sympathetic vibration. If the stone holds a memory of the ley and you are attuned to it, we might be able to amplify the signal. See what you see. He placed the stone in the bowl of water. He sprinkled the dust around it, muttering under his breath. Then he struck the tuning fork against the edge of the table. It didn't produce a normal musical note. It emitted a low, throbbing that made my teeth ache. The silvery dust on the table trembled. Now take the stone, he instructed, his voice hushed. Focus on it. Think of your dreams. Think of your mother. Hesitantly, I reached into the bowl and lifted the dripping stone. The moment my fingers closed around it, the tuning fork's seemed to pierce directly into my skull. The world didn't vanish. It overlaid. I was still in the spire, but I could see another place, transparent and shimmering like a heat haze over the books and scrolls. A forest of impossible trees, their bark glowing with a soft, internal silver light. A path of white stones led into deepening green shadows, and I felt a pull, a desperate, homesick yearning that was not my own. It was the stone's memory, the echo of a place. But beneath that beautiful image, another sensation seeped through. A cold, oily darkness, a corruption. It felt like rot on the roots of those majestic trees, like a poison in the silver light. And with it came a whisper, not in words, but in intent. Hunger, convergence, awakening. I gasped, dropping the stone back into the bowl with a splash. The vision snapped away. I staggered, my head pounding. Orwin caught my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. What did you see? He breathed, his eyes blazing. The forest, the Glimmerwood. It's It's sick. Something is wrong there. Something dark. Orwin's excited expression faded into deep concern. The corruption in the ley, it's not just a disturbance, it's an infection, and it's centered on the heartwood. He looked at me with new gravity. Your stone isn't just a key, girl. It's a compass, and it's pointing to the source of the wound. Before I could process this, hurried footsteps echoed on the stairs. Cale returned, his face like thunder. Behind them came Captain Revik, a grizzled warrior with a bloody bandage on his arm, and trailing behind them was old Mara from my village. My heart leapt. Mara! Ilah, child, she said, her voice trembling but clear. She came as ordered, but we were not alone on the road. Cale's voice was
Silence, thick and suffocating, filled the scholar's spire after Orwin's pronouncement. Go to the Glimmerwood, the forbidden Heartwood, the source of the corruption. Old Mara was the first to speak, her voice cracking like dry kindling. No, you cannot send her into that place of ill stories. It is death. Staying here is death, Kel replied, his tone not unkind, but final. He looked from Mara's defiant face to Captain Revik's grim one, and finally to me. Vorlog is not acting alone. He is being guided or used by whatever is poisoning the ley. He has new, unnatural soldiers. He knew our moves before we made them. This is no longer a border war. It is a siege on reality itself, and the key to breaking it, he nodded toward the stone in Orwin's hand, points there. I felt the eyes of everyone in the room on me, the king's calculating stare, the archivist's feverish curiosity, the captain's wary respect, and Mara's protective fear. The weight of it was immense, a physical pressure. I was no longer just Alara. I was the compass, the anomaly, the hope of a kingdom I'd only just entered. What would I do there? My own voice sounded strange to me, calm amidst the inner turmoil. I'm a healer, not a warrior. I can't fight corrupted things. You are a healer, Kel agreed, stepping closer, and the land is sick. You have a connection to it through your blood and this stone. Orwin believes you might be able to sense what is wrong in a way no one else can, to find the source of the corruption. That is the first step to curing it. And if the source finds me first, the memory of the oily darkness in the vision made my skin crawl. Then you will not be alone. Cale's words were a vow. I will lead a company myself, the best of the Stonekeep. Our mission will be to get you to the Heartwood, to protect you while you do whatever it is a healer does for a dying forest. It was a mad plan, a desperate gamble. But as I looked at Mara, thinking of Elmwood's people now huddled in the bailey below, thinking of the hum in the mountain and the puppets with yellow eyes, I saw no other path. Running and hiding were illusions. The sickness would spread until there was nowhere left to hide. The villagers, I said, their safety, that was our bargain. And it stands, Kel said. They remain under the protection of the keep. My strongest captain, Revik here, will stay behind with half the garrison to hold these walls. Vorlog will attack here to draw us out or to take our base. We must be swift. He was already planning, already dividing his forces, risking his kingdom on the chance that I could somehow understand a magical sickness. The trust he was placing in me was terrifying. I need to see them, I said suddenly. My people, before we go. Cale studied me for a moment, then nodded. Captain, escort her to the bailey. Keep a close guard. Archivists, prepare what she will need. Maps, lore, anything. We leave at dusk. Travel under cover of night. The bailey of the Stonekeep was a scene of organized tumult. Tents had been erected against the inner walls. Cook fires smoked. Children cried, comforted by mothers with frightened eyes.
Men of Elmwood stood in grim, huddled groups, clutching farming tools as if they were weapons. They looked so small, so out of place against the immense gray battlements. When they saw me, a ripple went through the crowd, whispers of, "Alara, the healer, she's with the king." Mara, who had followed me down, stepped forward and took my arm, her gnarled hand surprisingly strong. They're scared, child. They don't understand why they had to leave their homes, only to be brought to another stone prison. I walked among them, touching a shoulder here, meeting a worried gaze there. I saw Evander and Alara, the twins, clinging to their mother's skirts. I knelt before them. "You must be very brave," I said softly. "You are protecting Elmwood by being here. You are its heart, kept safe." The little girl, Alara, stared at my neck. "You have a pretty stone," she whispered. I touched it. It was my mother's. It reminds me to be brave too. I looked up at their mother. "They will be safe here. The king has given his word." She nodded, tears in her eyes, unable to speak. I rose and faced the growing crowd. I was no orator. I was a woman who fixed broken bones and mixed poultices, but they needed words now more than medicine. "People of Elmwood," I called out, my voice carrying over the murmur, "I know you are afraid. I am afraid. We have been brought to a place we do not know because an old evil is stirring, an evil that wants our valley, our homes, our very lives." I took a deep breath. "But we are not helpless. We are not alone. King Kale offers us his shield, and I must go to find the source of this sickness, to try and stop it before it reaches our doors." A man spoke up, Hemet, the blacksmith. "You're leaving. To go where?" "To the Glimmerwood." A collective gasp ran through them. Superstitious fear widened their eyes. "It is the only way," I said, forcing conviction into my voice. "While I am gone, you must be strong. Help the keep's people. Follow Captain Revik's orders. You are not prisoners, you are guests, and you are Elmwood's hope. Keep that hope alive here within these walls." It wasn't a grand speech, but it was honest. I saw some backs straighten, some fearful looks harden in resolve. They were tough people, used to hardship. They just needed a direction for their strength. As I turned to go, Hemet stepped forward. "Ilara," he held out his hand. In it was a small, perfectly crafted iron nail. "For luck," he grunted, "to fix what's broken." I took it, the metal warm from his hand. It was a healer's token in its own way. "Thank you, Hemet." Back in the North Tower, now a temporary command post, the mood was all business. Orwin had spread a map over the table, covered with his spidery notes. Kale and Captain Revik were leaning over it. "The pass is watched, so we go through the Whispering Caves," Kale was saying, tracing a route that skirted the mountains, longer but hidden. "It emerges here, near the old standing stones, a day's march from the Glimmerwood's edge." "The caves are unstable, my king," Revik warned, "and not just from falling rock. Old magic sleeps there." "All magic is waking now, Captain," Kale said grimly. "We will risk it." He looked up as I entered. "Are they settled?" "As much as they can be." I placed Hemet's nail on the table beside the map. "They will hold." Kale glanced at the nail, then at me, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Good. Now we prepare." He pointed to the map. "Our route is here, a small group, 20 of my best. Speed and stealth are our armor. Orwin has a satchel for you, notes on the Glimmerwood's flora, what little we know of its guardians, and this." He handed me a leather-bound journal, empty. "Record everything you feel, every impression. It may be vital." The reality of it crashed down on me. I was going on a journey into myth and terror, led by a king, guarded by soldiers, to perform a task I didn't understand. The sheer absurdity of it almost made me laugh, but the fear was too strong. What if I fail? The question was for myself as much as for him. Kale met my gaze, holding it with the force of a cliff face against the wind. Then we will have tried, and we will fall together, fighting for the light rather than waiting for the dark to swallow us whole. That is not failure, Ilara. That is meaning. His words didn't take away the fear, but they gave it a shape, a purpose. It was a weight to carry, not a chain to drag me down. As dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and reds, we gathered in the lower gate, a shadowed archway away from the main bailey. 20 warriors, clad in darkened leather and steel, faces grim and set. Kale, with a sword at his back, looked every inch the warrior king. I wore the practical clothes, my healer's pouch at my belt beside the journal, my mother's stone and Hemet's nail in a small pouch around my neck. No fanfare, no speeches. Kale gave Revik a final, firm nod. The captain saluted, fist to heart. Then the king's eyes found me in the gloom. Stay close, do exactly as I say, and trust your senses. He turned and led the way into the gathering dark, a shadow among shadows. I took one last look up at the high walls of the keep, where the people of Elmwood now depended on me, and then I followed. The gate closed behind us with a soft, definitive thud.